Hi, everybody. I just wanted to start with this little slideshow that will introduce you to the first two chapters, well, the second and third chapter. And just as a little warning, there may be some mistakes in this video. I'm pretty tired. I've redone this video like 3 times. First time I went through. It's going to be kind of a long one because I'm kind of making it so that it's easier for you to understand this chapter in a shorter amount of time. So that we don't have to read through the whole thing. So anyway, it's going to go pretty quickly. So you do need to pause it. I'm expecting that you have your map out. You're going to map some places. First time I went through this and I made the mistakes, and the like 4th time that I did it, I was like 15 minutes into the video and I realized that it had gone off and it was not recording anymore. So anyway, here we go for, I think this is actually number 6, and we're going to try to go through and I'll try to remember everything, but it's an important chapter that we need to review to look at why the rest of the book is important. And it has to do with how these countries got to be where they are, which is all how they've grown. How have they started, from little tribes and become bigger and bigger as people settle down and start to farm and get more food, so they start to live longer. And now we're to the point where the earth is carrying, it's called a carrying capacity. There's always a lot of debate about how many people can the earth hold, and that's called the carrying capacity. Some people say we already passed it. Some people say that it could hold 8 billion as long as people don't consume as much as we do today. So, the consumption has to do not just with, food, but what we buy. We're a big purchasing consumer country in the US. And there's, the saying that if every country consumed the amount of resources that the US does, we would need 7 planets just to, all the energy, all the petroleum, all of the plastics, everything that we're a little disposable. We like our plastic everything, plastic napkins, plastic, not napkins, plastic spoons, plastic forks. But also just, something new comes along. We want to get rid of the old one. We get the new one. And, not all countries can live like that. And so the question is, how do we sustain the planet in a way that allows for, these 7 billion people to curb their own populations, right? Because population only starts to go down once women get educated. That's the way that population has swung big time, unless there's like drastic policy like China, they make these rules. But anyway, it's an important chapter to look at. So we're going to go through and do that and take a look at this as you map these places. Let's see. I am going to use my spotlight, but then I'm going to, oh, no. Yep. Good. Okay. Sorry. I've got to be able to do both of these at once. So first place you are going to map is East Asia. I think most of you did it already. And then you're going to map South Asia. Now remember, East Asia is just these 3 areas. The Korean Peninsula and Japan and China. And then South Asia is really 3 countries. So include in your map, right now, you can pause this video, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Okay, that's the second most populated area. And then we have Europe. And Europe is very dense. Everybody in Europe lives in cities. Most people do not want to be in the suburbs. The cost of living is maybe cheaper, but they like to be in the culture. They like to not have to have a car. It's a very different value system than the US has. Like, everybody has 2 cars in Europe. That's not the case. Parking is expensive. They don't want that. They want to, and public transportation is really very good. So there's a lot of people in Europe, lots of cities. So most people have settled in ecumenes, right? Ecumenes are areas where it's been very ideal, either along the coast, along river valleys. This is where the river valley in China, in Egypt, you can even see, look at all the people here going right along the Nile, which drains into the Mediterranean. And then you have all the European countries. So anyway, this is human settlement all around the world. The ideal places where people are, it's not too hot, it's not too wet, it's not too dry, it's not too high. Elevation wise, people are not in high areas. So, you can up here, there's a reason there's nobody up here, right? No human settlement. It is too cold. And mountainous right here, right? This whole area right above India. So 2/3 of the world's population are in these 4 areas. You've plotted 3 of them. The 3 that you've plotted are East Asia, South Asia. Third one is Europe. Good. And the 4th one is Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is the Philippines. And then all of these countries right here, you got from Vietnam to Laos. Think about where these countries are, map them, say these countries out loud as you are mapping them. Okay, so pause this video, map them, and this long string of islands down here, which is very populated. There's probably about 2,000 islands in the country of Indonesia. So Indonesia is, it's just hugely populated. So all of these make up Southeast Asia. And Indonesia actually goes into part of this island, which the other half is Papua New Guinea. So, and some of them are very remote, but there's, overall, when you consider most of the islands like Java and what's the other one in Indonesia? I can't remember. Anyway, most of the population is on really just 2 islands, but there's thousands of other little islands. So anyway, that's the 4th most populated area. Okay. Now this is called a cartogram, and you can see another one on your map, in your book, page 51. I want you to now pause this video, and you're going to put a bullet in 2 countries. The 2 most populated countries are China and India. And you may be looking at this map saying, what the heck? This is the weirdest map I've ever seen, because this is called a cartogram. So the countries with whatever they're measuring, I could be measuring how many women have PhDs. I could be measuring how many people have access to healthcare. But the bigger the amount of your data, the bigger the country will look. So if I'm looking at population, then China is going to look really big. India is going to look really big. So please put markers in those 2 countries. They are the 2 most populated countries. You don't have to write a whole lot about them at this point. Just write China. Most populated, and second most populated is India. And notice what happened to the largest landmass. The largest landmass in the world was Russia, but it's tiny. It's this little sliver of green because there's not many people there. And remember, this is a population map. The second most largest landmass is, anybody know? Pause it if you think you know. Canada, right there. Not very populated because most of it is like frozen over. At least it always has been. So again, this is basically distorted based on how many people are in the countries. And, you can see that some of these areas, this is Nigeria. Nigeria is one of the most populated countries in Africa. Try to remember these places. You should actually put a marker on Nigeria right now. Spend 20 seconds and do that. And just write Nigeria, most populated country in Africa. And notice all of Europe is pretty fat. There's a lot of people there. And Japan is very fat. So is South Korea. So anyway, that's a cartogram. So moving on, can't move on like I normally do. This is just looking at how dense the people are. Like areas that are really dense are the blue. And we know there's a lot of blue in Europe. Big cities. People love to live in the Parises and the Nice and the Provence and Rome and London. So that's just, it's not really called arithmetic. It's called arithmetic. Arithmetic population density. It's just how many people per square area. Okay. New term. Try to remember it. And notice all along East China, Eastern China, and Japan. Japan's very dense. Lots of people. And in this little strip, right, this is Bangladesh. So let's look at some critical issues now. Obviously, there's more people in the world today than ever. During the second half of the 20th century, remember, 20th century is 1900s. So in the second half of the since the second half of the 1900s, we've increased the most. And you'll see the population spike go way up in just a second. So LDCs, we talk a lot about these two terms. So write these down in your notes right now, pause it. LDC is, in other words, another way of saying a poor country, but it's not really a poor country. It could be just, it might be it might not be very, very poor. It might just be a little bit poor. And it's not very accurate to call them poor anyway, because you don't know what you're basing that off of. If it's natural resources, is it how much money the people have? Is it how much money the government has? Is it how much money the country makes overall? So the best way to describe it is less developed country. Okay, so almost all countries that we talk about can be categorized in less developed, more developed, or in the middle, they're emerging economies like the Indias, the Mexicos, the Russias that are, they're almost to these, we used to call them first world countries, but that doesn't make any sense because that was based on like the Cold War. So there's less developed, emerging economies, and more developed. So what is the carrying capacity of the Earth? Is it 9 billion or have we already gone over it? Overpopulation now does not mean very populated. It might be very populated like Japan, but they're not overpopulated because they're a very strong trading partner with a lot of other countries. So they get all of their imports to feed themselves and they're totally fine. They're one of the richest countries in the world. So Japan and Korea, they're not overpopulated just because there's a lot of people there. Overpopulation means that they are outstripping their resources. Countries like Mali, I lived in Mali for about 2.5 years, so I talk a lot about it. And you can plot that on the map right now. You can write down Mali just so you see where it is, because it's a good case study for an LDC. Remember what an LDC was? Less developed country. So Mali is one of the poorest countries in the world as far as resources go, as far as income generation, all of it. And they do not have resources. They don't have mines. They're not even on the coast. They're landlocked. So they have no resources and they are overpopulated. Even though there's not that many people there, it doesn't take much before they don't have anything left. So they need to really, be strong traders with people around them. But it's very hard when you have no coast. So now, arithmetic was how many people live in an area. Physiologic has to do with how many people in an area that is fertile, that you can grow food in. Luckily, we live here, right? I mean, we have lots of land that is farmable. It's in a temperate zone. We have a lot of rainfall. We have good soil, so it's easy to grow stuff. So, it's not just because we've, become this superpower out of nothing. We had a lot of great resources that, we were able to profit with. So anyway, we are agriculturally rich in that denomination. So in that area, redo this slideshow, but I'm not going to. Physiological population density simply means that there's enough fertile land area for the amount of people that are there. Okay. The third, this is just showing you where it is. Like, look at this physiological population density, right? Lots of good farmland in this area. Eastern Europe, this is, and in India. Okay, so high physiological density. You might just want to plot Eastern Europe somewhere, maybe in the middle of Poland, right? You don't have to, or you could draw a line around Eastern Europe. That's a little harder to do. And India. India has a lot of productive farmland as well. Agricultural density, however, has to do with how many farmers per square acre of land. I'm sorry, per square mile. It depends on what it is that you're measuring. It could be per square kilometer. But anyway, farmers, how many farmers there are per square mile. So now we are looking at why populations start to grow. How many babies people have minus how many people are dying. That gives you a natural increase rate. So we're going to write down some key definitions here. The percentage by which population grows per year is called the natural increase rate. Okay. And again, it's the crude birth rate minus crude death rate. So crude birth rate, we're going to start abbreviating. So try to remember these. Crude birth rate per 1,000 people, how many babies are born per 1,000 people, minus how many people are dying. That gives you the natural increase rate, right? And in the US, it's kind of zero. We have about for every baby born, somebody is dying. So we have what's called ZPG, zero population growth. Now here, this is an important chart that you all are going to have to remember. And this is something that tells the story of every country. This is stage one. There are no countries anymore left in stage one. So spend a minute and look at what's happening. This is 40, this is 10, and this is per 1,000 people. So for every 1,000 people, there were 40 people, 40 babies being born. But that's high. That's a high birth rate. Lots of babies being born. This is when we were in small tribes, basically. We had the average life expectancy was probably about 35. You were an old person. And then, you had lots of babies. As soon as girls got their period, they started having babies. That's what happened for the last 10,000 years. So you had a lot of babies being born, but a lot of people dying in this first stage, which means the population stays pretty low. So it's called a low stage, and this is what it looks like, right? Lots of people dying off here pretty early on. This is how many people. Blue is men, pink is women. We've got very sexist colors going on here. And basically, not a lot of growth is happening. So for every, again, every person who's dying, somebody's being born, which means the population is not growing until people start to farm right here. Okay, so now this is every country in the world going through this phase, stage two. Okay, so stage two, you're talking about birth rates still being high, but look what happened to the death rate. The death rate is going way down. So what happened here? This was one of the biggest reasons was germ theory. People discovered that just by washing your hands, people stop dying. You still have infectious diseases. You still have a lot of problems. Stage two countries are very poor. So these are called less developed countries. But because they're living longer and people are still having a lot of babies, their population is growing really, really fast. So if you look at a stage two country, you see it's a lot fatter on the bottom. Okay, and it kind of tapers slowly here, but it's rapidly, rapidly growing. So it means all these young people are very soon going to be up in the middle area. Now, stage three, you're talking about emerging economies. These countries are starting to come out of poverty. Women are getting educated. They're getting access to healthcare and things like contraception, family planning. And you'll see now what's starting to happen with the birth rate. The birth rate is also going down. So this is Mexico. This is India. China was kind of skewed. China's an exception to all this because they kind of went way, way down because of that one child rule. But anyway, so the population is still going up here, but not as much at all as it was in stage two. So the natural increase rate is going up, but again, these are called emerging economies in stage three. Okay, and notice there's a lot more, sort of solid base here. The amount of people in the middle area means that the economy is starting to get stronger, but you'll notice over here, a lot of people in the middle ages mean this is like older people, younger people. So a lot of people in this middle area means that they're working. So a lot of people are employed right here in the middle. And that's what's happening in stage four. So stage four is the US and almost all European countries. Actually, some European countries are actually declining in birth rate. And birth rates are actually going negative, even though in this graph, it doesn't really look like it. But this stage five is a little bit hypothetical. Yeah, it says rising again. But this is kind of controversial with stage 5, so I wouldn't worry about this too much. But stage 4 is where most developed countries are, MDCs. And again, there's a lot of other little new vocabulary that comes in here. When that birth rate is very, very high, we call women as having how many children women have in their lifetime is called total fertility rate. So a high birth rate means there's a high fertility rate. And unfortunately, the reason why so many people have so many babies is because so many babies die. And that may sound um, like a contradiction, because you think, well, if your babies are going to die, why are you going to have the babies? But you need the babies in order to survive. That's how for 10,000 years we've been living on the farm and being able to provide enough food for the table, is that you have kids who are working to help you earn an income to eat food and make a living. So it's expected that babies will die, which is kind of sad. But once women stop having babies, then they are able to get out of this sort of cycle of poverty. But it is something that depends on women getting educated, which in many countries is not easy to do. So this is a very important video. I'm actually going to skip it, and I'm going to put it to watch maybe tomorrow. It's really good. This guy is Danish. He's one of my heroes. He's a statistician. He deals with numbers. And he makes numbers interesting. He has these graphs that he's going to show you on this big screen, and he shows you this was his first wealthiest country. This was actually the US maybe at one point. And then these were the poor countries. And then he shows you how they started to develop over time to where, these people earn flip enough for flip-flops. They earn a bicycle, a car, and finally they're traveling all over the world. Fascinating video that you will watch later. So anyway, the amount of a population that takes to double in time is just called a doubling rate. Look at where we went in 1850, right? We were looking at almost this is like what, 200 years ago? And we were at 1 billion people. So we have a doubling rate that has been happening exponentially higher every time. So if it's decreasing doubling time, it means there's less time for countries to double. So the countries that have a lot more children are going to double in a shorter amount of time, which is called decreased doubling time. Increased means it's just taking longer for a country to double in population. So we talk about deaths in 2 ways. Infant mortality rate, babies who die. It's very, very common. This is a very sort of sad graph that's showing, the high infant mortality. Oh, I'm sorry, fertility rate. So, and there's a correlation. High fertility rate usually is because there's a high infant mortality rate. So lots of babies dying here, you can see. And this is called sub-Saharan Africa, right? Not Northern Africa. Notice Northern Africa and Southern Africa are much better off than sub-Saharan Africa. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And we'll talk about that as we go through this whole course, actually. And then there's some outliers here. You've got Afghanistan, Pakistan, very high infant mortality rates, high total fertility rates. So, and you can look at the charts in your own book on page 57. I don't think you need to necessarily plot these yet on your map. Just make sure you know these terms. This is a close-up of a population pyramid, looking at females to males. And life expectancy, how long people live, right? It looks like this is Russia, and this is in 2010. Some people living this high, but it looks like the average amount of people are living to be somewhere between, 70, 75, and then it tapers off pretty dramatically. But you have a big fat middle area of the ages 20 to 60, which means you're going to have a pretty healthy economy for the most part, as long as you have not that many people here and not that many people here. That's called the dependency ratio. And you can see an example of India in 2010. Watch what happens with this population pyramid, though. 40 years later, all these young people have moved into this middle area. Okay, so India is a booming emerging economy, a lot more jobs than there used to be, a lot more employment. And you can tell a lot from population pyramids. Basically, the age distribution right here, dependency ratio, how many people in the middle are working to support the people here and the people here. And sex distribution tends to be, well, sex distribution is interesting. I mean, you can see, look at India. There are fewer girls than boys, and especially up at the top, women tend to outlive boys. I'm sorry, a lot more boys than girls. I think I said that backwards. But that's barely, actually. It looks more off than it is. China is another one that's a little bit more distorted with sex ratio. And that tends to be in countries that have strict anti-natalist policies. If there's a lot of pressure to not have kids and you only are going to have one kid, then there's a lot of pressure for that one child to be a boy, because they are the ones who marry and go on to like support the family and will stay with the grandparents. Women tend to move into the men's homes, which means the grandparents are left alone. So there's a reason to have boys, because it's kind of like your social security when you get older. So that's a population pyramid. And I wanted to just talk about, like, okay, so now look at the sizes here. Poor countries tend to be shaped more like the Eiffel Tower. This is Niger in French. It's a French-speaking country in Africa. They call it Niger. And Niger, you can tell, is very poor. Not many people in this middle working area, but a lot of very young people. Okay, lots of people having babies, probably high infant mortality, high fertility rate. And then, Guatemala is getting up there. It's not as I was going to say badly off as Niger. Niger is also a desert country, landlocked as well. So they have a lot of disadvantages. So anyway, differences between wealthy countries. Notice they're shaped more like a barrel. Lots of people in the middle areas to support the economy, and fewer people being born. Family planning, access to birth control, healthcare is huge, right? So these are wealthier country pyramids. Again, these are poorer countries, more Eiffel Tower shape. And remember, we call those MDCs, more developed countries. There's some reasons people talk about, like, why is it that we have more women living longer? I have a funny video kind of explaining that. Oh, here's Mali. This is the country that I lived in. It's the second poorest country in the world, but the people are amazing and warm and very friendly. I always felt safe. This is funny. These are looking at different cities in the US. Florida, look at how weird this population pyramid is. Why do you think it's upside down? So many old people in Florida, right? They moved down, and this is probably during the winter when people leave and move down into the warmer climate. A lot of old people live in Naples, Florida, so very few compared to older people. This one, you've got a lot of 22-year-olds. So what's going on in this city? It is, I think, either, oops, I didn't mean to do that, and I can't see behind my little screen. Maybe you can read it. I think it's either a college town or it's a military town. No, it wouldn't be military, because it would be only men, which is probably this right here. Anchorage, Alaska. Or that might be the fishing boats in Alaska, which tend to be male dominated. So anyway, you can learn a lot about population pyramids. And again, this is the demographic transition model that we looked at earlier. You really need to look at page 58 and 59. And I would plot on each stage. Stage 1, there are no countries. Remember, no countries today that are left in stage 1. These are hunting and gathering tribes. Stage 2 countries, Cape Verde is a country that is in stage 2, Mali, Afghanistan, Stage 3, these are emerging economies. Remember that birth rate is starting to go way down. Mexico, very high amount of people being educated. The economies are really growing, and birth rate is going way down. And then low growth again, stage 4, you're looking at the United States, England. And here are just some common things about it. First agricultural revolution, 10,000 years ago, right here, boom, people start to live a lot longer. People stop dying because they have more access to food, medical knowledge, vaccines. The US, basically in stage 2, you see, well, US in stage 2, it's interesting, and the UK go through this, MDCs, more developed countries, go through this during the Industrial Revolution. And so there's high growth during this period where, we don't have great sanitation. And we do have a death rate going down, but still people are having babies like mad. There's no birth control. There's very, very little health care. And so that natural increase rate still goes way up. And today, the poorest countries are basically going through medical revolutions. They have vaccines, they have medical knowledge, but not a lot of access to healthcare and birth control, family planning, which would bring that down here. So anyway, death rates going down still. So we're looking at 2 different themes here. Poor countries are getting access to vaccines and medical knowledge. Rich countries are going through the Industrial Revolution. Stage 3, moderate growth, emerging economies here. So you might want to pinpoint India, Mexico, just make sure they are in stage 3. You know that from the map. Low growth now, you have the United States and England. And let's just compare life expectancy. This is my funny video on women versus men. Why is it that men live to be about 76 in the US? Women live to be about 81. We outlive men by about 5 years. And here are some hypotheses, maybe eating habits. I don't know. What do you guys think? We do have fewer addiction rates, less violence. We're not in the military as much as men. Taking advantage of healthcare during pregnancy tends to build a relationship with healthcare providers. So women going to the doctor more often will stop, they discover diagnoses faster than men do. But those are all kind of hypothetical. And here are some, maybe these slides coming up are a little bit sexist, but maybe it points to some of the reasons why women outlive men. Men do things like this. This is supposed to be a joke. Don't take it seriously. You can pause these. That would be a missile that somebody, went over the edge with. And this guy getting his picture taken without his hazmat suit on. Not sure what kind of beautiful things there. And this guy's going to do some electrical work with his drill plugged in, standing on an aluminum ladder on a pool. Just I'm going to extend that ladder a little bit to replace this light. Going to work under my car, prop it up with some 4x4s. Anyway, we're going to pause here. I don't want to go on too long. This is good. Plot that for now. Bye, guys. We'll leave with Malthus. Muy mal. Population going way, way, way up. But food is only being produced at this rate. Exponential versus arithmetic.